first, the headline today, the top story in the nation's capital and around the country. Yesterday, a federal judge struck down the Biden administration's mask mandate for air travel and other public transportation. Now, the Biden administration responded that they were disappointed in the decision.
CDC recommended continuing the order for additional time, 2 weeks, to be able to assess the latest science in keeping with its responsibility to protect the American people. So this is obviously a disappointing decision. The CDC continues recommending wearing a mask in public transit.
Earlier today, however, the Biden administration indicated they do not plan to appeal the decision, effectively ending the federal mask mandate for public transportation. Well, Washington Watch reporter Marjorie Jackson joins us now with more, both from Washington's Union Station and Ronald Reagan National Airport.
Hello, Joseph. Right behind me here is the Ronald Reagan National Airport. Yesterday, a federal judge in Florida ruled that the CDC's mask mandates for traveling was not in their legal authority. So today, I have been out talking to all kinds of travelers who have been taking flights and catching trains and riding the Washington, D.C. Metro and gathering their opinions on the fact that the Biden administration will no longer be enforcing wearing masks in public transit. Yesterday, a federal court shot down the mask mandate for travel. What are your reactions?
Oh, I like it. I think it's good.
Wear your mask if you feel good about wearing it. If you don't feel good about wearing it, take it down. You have another opinion. Let God be the reason for your season.
I understand where people have a feeling that it should be up to them individually, how they want to lead their lives. We've been into this for 2 years now. I think we know what to do and what not to do.
The CDC gave me good advice. Judges aren't healthcare people. If I'm correct, it was out of Florida, wasn't it?
That's correct.
Yeah, well, there you go. It's a troublesome place, and they're just being belligerent.
Have you been traveling at all? And if so, have you been wearing a mask, or were the people around you?
I wore a mask coming here. I'm going back into Philly right now. And so I'm just going to at least try it out, with no mask. I've had Omicron. Wasn't a nice thing, but my antibodies are protecting me, which I've heard. It works, so I'm excited.
We actually have people on our tour. We have about 120 kids and 20 or so chaperones, and I would say probably 20% are wearing masks and 80% are not.
I got my mask lowered a little bit, though. I have it. But it's lowered because I don't want to give people the impression I think you're some type of disease. I want to give people the impression America's getting back online. We're moving forward in our country. We're showing more love now and not hate. I think that the coronavirus brought a lot of hatred amongst people. It made people be nasty and mean and not together. So for me and my leadership, I'll be trying to bring people more together, whether you have your mask up or down.
So clearly, people have a lot of different opinions about if they're excited about the mask mandate being dropped or if they're going to continue to opt to wear the mask while they're flying or traveling in other ways. Back to you, Joseph.
Thank you so much, Marjorie, for that great report. And frankly, your last guest there needs to have her own show. Perhaps we can give her a segment. I think we could all learn something from her. Great and encouraging report from the ground in the nation's capital today. But continuing our discussion of yesterday's ruling and the end of the federal mask mandates for airlines and public transportation, you might not have known that last month, FRC Action filed a similar lawsuit in the U.S. District Court. And joining me now by phone to discuss yesterday's ruling, as well as the FRC Action lawsuit, is Ken Klukowski, who filed the lawsuit on behalf of FRC Action. He's senior counsel at Schaerr Jaffe, LLP. Ken,
Joseph,
good to have you on the program.
Thank you for having me, sir. No, the pleasure is mine. Thank you, sir.
We are glad to have you. By now, most people are aware of the ruling. What was your reaction when you heard the decision?
Well, I was very encouraged that another well-credentialed, well-regarded judge in another part of the country, that one of the issues raised in the lawsuit before her, which has been before her for almost a year. This is a lawsuit that was filed in July of 2021 and has extensive briefing and argument, that when she got to the part of the case being raised there, that we are also raising in our case, that being that the mask mandate is now, with the current state of medical science of what we understand, about COVID, about airplanes, and about masks, that the science no longer supports the idea that people should have to wear masks, and that not everyone is equal. That people, we heard one of the people who were interviewed there, where he said that he's recovered from COVID, that he has natural antibodies. He understands that that protects him. To some degree, that is correct. And so children are at especially low risk from COVID, and they're at heightened risk, both physical risks and also mental risks from wearing masks. And that's been scientific literature that's become very prominent over the past few months. And so as we're looking at all these different aspects of the case, that this was a judge who saw what the law requires when a federal agency is imposing burdens on the American people. That law, by the way, is called the Administrative Procedure Act, the APA, and it sets forth the requirements that agencies need to meet when they're putting legal obligations or restrictions on you and me. And looking at that, among other things in the case, she concluded, just as we are arguing in our own case, that forcing people to wear masks on airplanes meets the definition of what the law calls arbitrary and capricious, and therefore that the judge did the right thing, Judge Mizell, in declaring it unlawful and setting it aside.
Now, Ken, a lot of people look at this decision, and this Center for Disease Control was making these recommendations. And of course, there's lots of doctors, lots of scientists at the CDC. And they look at this decision essentially as a judge usurping the professional judgment of a whole bunch of doctors and medical professionals and substituting their judgment with her own. Is that the right way to look at this from a legal perspective?
It's definitely the wrong way to look at it. I agree that that's what the CDC is thinking. But the thing is, in America, this is a nation under the rule of law, and no one is above the law, not even the president. And all of these people at the CDC, they work for the president. They are subordinate to the president. So if the president has to follow the law, so do the people at CDC. And the law in question, again, the APA, there's a broad body of Supreme Court precedent and other federal appeals courts that lay out the criteria of what the APA requires. It requires, in a word, what's called reasoned decision-making, and then it goes through all these hallmarks of what it means to be arbitrary and capricious, and that not being reasoned decision-making. And let me just give you one quick example, Joseph, of what I'm talking about, because we raised this in our briefs with FRC Action in our own case, which is in the Northern District of Texas. And what we explained there is that it is undisputed that the air on airplanes is safer, it is more sanitized many times over than what you have in a restaurant. And yet CDC guidelines say it's okay to be unmasked in a restaurant, but you need to be masked in an airplane when you're sitting the same distance away from people that you would in a restaurant, and where the airplane air is cleaner. And what I mean by that is, like in a restaurant, the air may recirculate through a filter about every 15 minutes. In an airplane, it's every 30 seconds. And there's all of these studies that have been done, including by the government. Like, for example, the Defense Department did a study roughly a year ago where they said that it would take 54 hours on an airplane to get infected if you're sitting nearby someone who has COVID. 54 hours. Now, the longest flight on the planet is only 1/3 that. It's 18 hours. It's a flight to Singapore. And of course, people flying domestically, it's only a fraction of 18 hours. And yet CDC guidelines say, well, you need to wear a mask on that airplane, but you don't need to wear it on the restaurant, despite the fact that the air is dirtier for COVID spread. That is an example of arbitrary and capricious, and this is just a judge making government agencies follow the law.
Now, Ken, The arguments that you've made there are compelling to a lot of people who are watching and listening today, I know. But tell us, why did it take this long? Because we know that the White House had just extended the travel mask requirements. They were set to expire in a couple weeks anyway. We've been having these debates for literally 2 years, more than 2 years. Why did it take this long, if that's what the law required, for a court to step in and say, no, federal government, you can't do that?
Well, because the evidence has to build up over time. I mean, it's almost like, and you want to have a presumption of good faith when we're dealing with a public health emergency and government is trying to rush into the breach and figure out what needs to be done to keep people safe. It's like people start off with the benefit of the doubt, and you assume that if the government is telling you to follow the science, that they're going to follow the science. And so with the scientific method, we try all sorts of approaches if there's a medical hypothesis that it might be helpful, and then we track the data. And the data that we've built over time, see, we started off thinking masks are very effective. Then as the data built up, we found out that masks are only slightly effective, like a common cloth mask that many of our listeners would have been wearing. A cloth mask, according to scientific studies, is only 10% effective. A surgical mask, only 12% effective. Even the vaunted N95 mask, depending on the type you're wearing, is anywhere from 46 to 65% effective. But it takes months to get that kind of data, and it also takes months to get the data to where we realize that there are actually health consequences, that there is a potential downside, especially for children, when it comes to prolonged mask wearing. That takes the time. That takes a while to build up the evidence.
Ken, in about 20 seconds, how does this decision affect the lawsuit that you are in charge of on behalf of FRC Action, challenging these mandates?
Well, that's exactly what our judge is figuring out right now. He's requested supplemental briefings. He's like, this other judge has struck this down nationwide, but of course that case could be appealed. She could be reversed on appeal. And so he's asking us to file briefs by Friday, making the arguments, us and the Justice Department, as to whether under the law he is empowered to move forward at this point and issue his own ruling in our own lawsuit. So that's what we're right in the middle of working on this week.
And we look forward to hearing more about it. Klukowski, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, sir. God bless.